Hi everyone, this is Keith coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I have just completed a visit to Chattanooga Memorial Park Cemetery. This cemetery services the residents of Chattanooga along with Red Bank, Tennessee and surrounding areas. During my visit, I did have my video camera rolling along with my still camera and my GPS data logger. I'm a firm believer that we can use technology, modern technology, to form temporal and geospatial documentation of our cemeteries. One of the reasons that I'm such a strong believer is because sometimes things happen in cemeteries to move the position of the important features. For example, I'm sure we've all seen in the news where cemeteries have been affected by floods. Or what if a large tree falls in a certain section in a cemetery and disrupts the placement of several grave sites? On an extreme example, I have been to Hawaii, where lava flows have affected entire cemeteries and displaced them. So, having proper mapping, documentation, geospatial as well as temporal, helps give context to the placement of the features that we want to remember in the cemeteries. So I hope you enjoyed this drive-through. Along with the drive-through, I have produced a podcast. I'll play it in the background. As you are watching this video, you can listen to the podcast. I will let you know the podcast is produced with AI. And I know some of you won't like that because AI is kind of getting a negative vibe right now, but I am continuing to improve my education of AI technology and how it can help us with proper documentation within our cemeteries, but also proper layout, which will help us be more efficient as our cemeteries expand and keep up with demand of a growing population. I hope you enjoy this. Again, my name is Keith. If you are interested in this field of study, please feel free to reach out for me. I am available to give presentations of my work, and I would be happy to discuss that with you. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a really interesting frontier, actually, where historic preservation meets high-tech geospatial mapping. We're specifically looking at how we preserve community memory in historic burial grounds.
Yeah, it's not the first place you think of for cutting-edge tech, maybe.
Not at all. So today, our focus is the Chattanooga Memorial Park Cemetery. And we've got source material detailing this highly specific custom methodology they've used. They call it temporal and geospatial documentation. For us, what does that really mean? It sounds like crafting a super precise, time-stamped digital map of everything in this historic landscape.
That's a great way to put it, and it's a key distinction. We're not just, talking about an archive of photos or something static. Our mission here is really to understand the innovation behind producing this definitive 2025 baseline. Think of it as a factual geographic record, one that directly links high-resolution video, frame by frame almost, to specific real-world coordinates on the ground. It's about creating a data set that's so robust, so accurate, that future preservationists, maybe a generation from now, can compare it point for point, accurately.
Right, a true baseline. Okay, before we jump into the tech specifics, nuts and bolts, we need some context. Why this specific site? And why isn't, say, standard mapping good enough here? We're talking about a cemetery that's, over 125 years old?
That's right.
Located in Red Bank, right next to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the source mentioned it's on rolling, pretty challenging terrain.
Exactly. And that terrain, that history, it really dictates the physical form of the place, which in turn kind of dictates why you need this more complex documentation. This area, it originally started as the White Oak Cemetery.
White Oak, okay.
Yeah, on land that was once the Sawyer Farm. It's changed to Chattanooga Memorial Park. That happened around 1925. And that timing isn't random. It lines up perfectly with the region's, explosive industrial growth back then.
Ah, okay. We know Chattanooga was booming then, right? driven by the
A
railroad.
huge factor.
Like the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway, and heavy industry, iron manufacturing or transport, all that.
Precisely. And the people buried here, they weren't just names on stones, they were the workforce. They were quite literally the backbone of that industrial boom in the Tennessee Valley. Their history is, well, it's embedded right there in the landscape, in the stone. And crucially, the cemetery itself, its design evolved. It moved beyond the sort of rigid grid system you see in older colonial era graveyards. This site transitioned into what was then the preferred style, late 19th century aesthetic, the park cemetery.
Park cemetery. Okay, so instead of straight lines, neat rows, right angles,
Yeah,
we get something that feels more, I don't know, natural, organic.
exactly. Organic is a good word. The design deliberately respects the local East Tennessee topography. You see these elevated ridges, the slopes. It's typical of the limestone bedrock underneath.
Right.
So the internal roads, they aren't straight, they're winding, they follow the natural curves of the land, they go uphill, downhill.
Designed for views, maybe.
Absolutely, for aesthetics, for circulation, offering views, and the landscaping, mature trees, features they added like a duck pond.
Yeah.
It makes it a place for quiet reflection, for community memory.
Blending the practical with the beautiful.
Right. But that winding non-grid layout, that's the core geographic challenge. That's what the sophisticated documentation aims to solve.
That makes perfect sense. Because, yeah, if you have a standard square grid cemetery, mapping it accurately is relatively straightforward, basic survey points. But if your map has to account for winding paths, slopes, plots that aren't uniform because they fit the landscape, how do you capture that complexity dynamically? How do you make sure your visual record, your photos or video, lines up perfectly with the coordinates on such varied terrain?
And that is the critical innovation we're looking at here. You solve that challenge by synchronizing two high-frequency data streams very precisely. The method centers on doing a full drive-through of every accessible internal road, capturing the entire site in motion.
Yeah, drive-through.
Right. So the first stream is the visual record. Continuous, high-resolution video from a roof-mounted camera. This video picks up everything as the vehicle moves. The condition of the roads, the monuments themselves, any vegetation creeping in, signs, just the overall state of preservation as it exists right now, or, well, October 2025 for this benchmark.
Got it. Video stream 1. And stream 2 is the location data, the precision part.
Yes. At the exact same time, there's a dedicated GPS data logger running. It's recording positional data constantly at a very high frequency. We're talking every 1 to 5 seconds. And this generates what's called a GPX track. Think of it as a highly accurate digital line, a polyline, representing the exact path the vehicle took through the cemetery.
Okay, GPX track. But the real challenge, like you said, is locking those two together, right? Video is time-based, GPS is space-based. How reliable is that synchronization? Especially when you're moving maybe under trees. Couldn't even a tiny signal dropout throw the coordinates off by a few meters? That seems critical.
It is critical, and that's where the rigor of what they call the temporal metadata linkage is key. The systems, the camera, and the GPS, they have to operate on highly synchronized internal clocks. So by knowing the precise start time of that continuous video recording, every single frame afterwards can be mathematically paired back to a corresponding time-stamped GPS coordinate from the GPX file. The video essentially becomes the visual attribute, the what you see, and the GPX track provides the geographic framework, the where it is.
So the GPS track isn't just a line on a map anymore. It's like the geographical spine, and the video record is draped right over it.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. And this synchronization allows for seamless integration into GIS software, geographic information systems. You take that GPX track, import it into something like QGIS or ArcGIS, powerful mapping software. And that software understands the continuous positional data, and it lets researchers start building layers of information on top of that path.
Layers. Okay, describe that for us. What kind of data layers are we talking about, and how does that make preservation like proactive instead of reactive?
Well, once you have the road lines derived from the GPX track, you start adding, for instance, monument point layers. And these points aren't just dots on a map. They contain detailed attributes, information about the monument at that point.
Like what?
We're cataloging the type of stone. Is it granite, marble, sandstone? The erection date, usually from the inscription. A detailed assessment of its current condition. Is it cracking, tilting? Is there biological growth? And even transcriptions of the inscriptions themselves, linking the text to the specific location.
Wow, that's detailed.
And we can also map other things, special features like the precise boundary of that duck pond or the exact geometry of those high ridges you mentioned earlier. And crucially, all of this data Every attribute can be visually cross-referenced against the specific video frame linked to that exact coordinate.
That connection,
Hmm.
the data point to the visual evidence,
Yeah.
that seems to be the real power here.
It is.
It means the whole system becomes instantly queryable. You're not just looking at data, you're interacting with this historical landscape dynamically.
The querying power is, it's immense. You could literally ask the system, show me all the marble monuments put up before 1940 that are currently showing a high degree of tilting.
It would just highlight.
The GIS software highlights those specific points on the map. Then you click on a point and it can instantly pull up the video frame showing the visual proof, the tilting stone at that exact spot.
Or, thinking about maintenance, maybe highlight all the road sections where plants are encroaching and where the nearby monuments are made of that softer, older stone that needs careful handling.
Exactly. It allows for strategic, data-driven decision making. It shifts preservation planning away from guesswork.
Okay, so that direct link, attribute data to video frame,
Yeah.
that makes the whole data set incredibly valuable. It's not just an inventory, it's an active landscape management tool.
Precisely. It moves beyond simple inventory towards active, informed management.
Which brings us neatly to the application. Why this deep dive? Why should you, our listener, care about this almost forensic level of detail for a historic site that, maybe from the road, looks relatively stable?
Well, the critical point is that places like the Red Bank Chattanooga region, they aren't static. They're constantly changing. You've got rapid residential growth nearby, infrastructure projects, maybe changes in who's responsible for maintenance or how it's done.
Runoff patterns change.
Runoff changes, exactly. All these external forces continuously put pressure on the cemetery's landscape, especially those fragile, older stones and the original design integrity.
So this 2025 documentation, this baseline, it acts like a precise insurance policy against that change, against degradation.
That's a great way to think about it, yes. It is the definitive benchmark for that moment in time. So if, say, 5 years down the line, a major storm hits, maybe a huge old tree falls near that historic White Oak Spring area, damages several monuments, maybe even alters the ground contour slightly. Future researchers, or the cemetery managers, they don't have to rely on fuzzy memories or maybe incomplete paper site plans from decades ago.
Right.
They have this linked video, GPS, and GIS dataset. It allows them to show exactly what was lost or altered, compared directly to the 2025 baseline, down to the centimeter level coordinates and the visual proof in the video.
And that must be crucial for things like insurance claims or grant applications for repairs.
Absolutely. And understanding vulnerability. Because, as you mentioned, the materials matter. Those older, softer marbles are much more vulnerable than later granite markers. Documenting the exact condition of specific materials now is critical for planning proactive conservation work, for seeking funding before something fails catastrophically.
I also appreciate the sort of democratic potential here. You mentioned the goal is making this huge data set shareable, but practically speaking, is that feasible? I mean, the GPX tracks, maybe a database of the monument points, okay. But a massive, continuous high-res video file? That sounds enormous and maybe hard to work with.
It is large, yeah.
How do you make sure that, future genealogists tracing family history or local historical societies, how do they actually use this data without needing super expensive software or massive computing power?
That's a really valid challenge, and the approach tries to balance that precision with accessibility. You're right, the raw video files are large. But the core spatial data, the GPX tracks, the monument points may be exported as a geo package or similar standard format. Those are readable by free open source GIS software like QGIS.
Okay, so the basic map data is accessible.
Right. The goal is to make that core relational data, the coordinates and the attributes, widely accessible first. The video then serves as the high-fidelity backup. It's the verification tool for people doing really advanced preservation work or maybe detailed structural analysis or even legal boundary reviews.
Gotcha.
So it empowers future stewards by giving them the essential spatial intelligence they need to start with without forcing them to redo a costly and complex initial survey themselves.
It sounds like this work really honors not just the individuals buried there, but the whole story. Chattanooga's industrial past, the community's memory, and how they've kept that memory alive within this very specific, quite challenging piece of land.
I think that's right. And it raises an important standard for us, really. This whole documentation effort, it's grounded in the belief that historic cemeteries like this one, they deserve the same level of precise, high-tech documentation as any other significant heritage site.
Like a castle or a battlefield.
Exactly. Or an irreplaceable historic building. This methodology helps shift how we see cemeteries, not just as passive collections of graves, but as active, living, monitorable landscapes of collective memory.
So we want to leave you with a final thought, something provocative for you to maybe explore on your own.
Yeah, think about this. Considering how accessible and, frankly, precise this synchronized video GPS and GIS method is.
What other kinds of community memory landscapes out there, maybe places beyond just cemeteries, could really benefit from this? Think about historic main streets in small towns, maybe vulnerable coastal communities facing erosion.
Or even key urban parks that hold generations of history but are under pressure from development. Places that are changing maybe faster than we realize.
Which places near you are subject to that kind of rapid change and desperately need this kind of high-fidelity, time-stamped snapshot documentation right now before that history is altered or lost?
Doesn't it to think about?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.